Chronicle presents the main streets and back roads of New England. Tonight, enduring traditions on the coast of Maine as we explore the down east delights of the Kennebunks. So precious.
Yes,
meet Hartley Lord, 72 years old and fourth-generation resident of Kennebunk, Maine. Looking out from Lord's Point, he is standing on land that has been in his family since 1874. That's when his great-grandfather bought this former cow pasture for $235. After building a Victorian cottage for himself at the end of the point, he divided up the remaining land.
Yes, he broke the rest of the point up into 50-foot sections. Whatever you bought, you had to put up a cottage that cost at least $500.
He was maintaining the standards of the neighborhood.
Yes, he wanted to be sure that the place was really classy.
In 1874, a $500 cottage guaranteed that class. Today, with the point's land valued at several $1 million, great-grandfather Lord's wish has remained intact. And even though most of the land has been sold, Hartley Lord still owns a piece of the point. He and his wife live in this converted garage overlooking Kennebunk Cove. Now, Hartley, who is this portrait?
Mary, that's a wedding portrait of my great-grandfather, for whom I'm named. That's Hartley Lord, and he was born in 1825 here in Kennebunk, on the day that General Lafayette was honored here in town. And as my mother said, don't you know that his mother was mad as a hornet she couldn't go down to see the general.
Since 1825, there's been a Hartley Lord in Kennebunk. Mention Lord's Point, and it's like talking about an old friend. And driving down Summer Street is like reading a chapter out of the Lord family history.
Okay, well, this is Summer Street, and this section here begins what is known as Sea Captain's Row. And it's full of my relatives. There's a relative.
This gray house, look, I believe.
Yeah. When I was growing up, here's a relative.
This another gray and white.
Over here's another one.
Yeah. Like many wealthy merchants and sea captains in Kennebunk, the first Hartley Lord would summer at the point and live here in the winter and after retirement. But upon his death and his burial in the Kennebunk Town Cemetery, his house and 90 acres of land were passed on to the next generation's Hartley Lord. What are your memories as a young boy growing up here, playing here, summers here?
Well, I remember, of course, the thing that strikes me first, my father believed in having the kids work. And my brother and I had all kinds of chores we had to do. We had a tool shed down in back in the field for farm equipment, and it burned. So Father said, we've got to save that wood. And we had to go down there and pull all the nails out and bring the wood up to burn in the furnace. My father was a frugal man. Oh, yes, he didn't have anybody waste a thing. Yeah. Use it up, wear it out, make do or go without.
Lord is among the last of the lords in Kennebunk. The father of 2 daughters, he marks the end of the line. But like this 100-year-old clock that he tends in the Unitarian Church, his family will long remain a part of Kennebunk history. You grew up in a way that was very rare.
That was the way it was when I grew up. Everybody on the street was either a true relative or a complimentary relative. They had lived in those houses and their families before them. So if they were not related, we'd give them a complimentary cousin, you know. Across the street was Cousin Carrie Remick. She was no relation, but she was cousin all right. We had a feeling that the family was the entire length of the street. And we could go into any house, and they'd, of course, know us by name.
Gone are the days when a few prominent families made up the small New England town. Today, the cost of maintaining huge family homes is prohibitive, and many of the homes are being sold. Newcomers and tourists abound, bringing new names and new traditions. But these changes don't seem to bother Hartley Lord.
And I'm very fortunate to have gone through this period of transition, to have seen the changing years and changing customs. The new ones are pleasant, they're different, they're pleasant. And it's no use to sit down there on the beach and fight the tide's going to come in.
The early settlers discovered this beautiful spot in 1610. Over the years, great fortunes were made by merchants and sea captains and shipbuilders. But then, about 100 years ago, tourism became the big moneymaker, just as it is today. Only in those days, they toured in the grand style. By the 1870s, the Kennebunks were an established resort community. Grand hotels were built on land formerly owned by farmers. But it was land not suitable for farming, and with rocky coastlines a danger to fishermen, it was sold for the tourist industry. Local historian Joyce Butler.
Because after the Civil War, Americans who had moved to the cities and made their fortunes were looking for places to go and vacation and get away from the heat of the city, like Boston. And the Kennebunks was one of the places they discovered. At one point, we had 50 hotels and boarding houses in the Kennebunks.
By the 1920s, Victorian cottages and canoeing on the Kennebunk River were common sights. From May to September, the Kennebunk Beach train station was the last stop for many sun and sea-seeking tourists. 4th of July parades, Old Home Week, and frolicking on the beach provided the backdrop for turn-of-the-century Americana. These scenes are captured by American primitive artist Sissy Buchanan. Like Grandma Moses, she depicts an era long gone, but not forgotten.
The state of the world today, there are so many terrible things to worry about. I think we all want something simple and wonderful to hold on to.
What ends up on an artist's canvas is also etched in the memory of Hartley Lord. With his family, he has been as much a part of Kennebunk history as the rocks at Lord's Point.
A genuine New England character, Mary.
Hartley Lord is a wonderful guy who is known all over the Kennebunks, Peter. He is, however, as we mentioned in the story, he has 2 daughters, so he is the last of the Hartley Lords in Kennebunk. And there's been a Hartley Lord in Kennebunk for the last 150 years, so that's a little sad. But on the other hand, that great, beautiful house that was owned by his grandfather has been purchased by someone who really cares about the house and is restoring it and preserving it, and it's not going to turn into condominiums as so many of the great old mansions have.
That indeed is good news, isn't it? Coming up next, happy as a clam in Kennebunkport, Yankee Magazine's best fried clams in New England, as we continue along the main streets and back roads of the Kennebunks. Kennebunkport is famous for its down east charm and its seaside vistas, but anyone who's ever spent any time there knows it's also famous for its fried clams, Mary.
Oh, yum, Peter. Sitting right on the bridge that spans the Kennebunk River is a place called the Clam Shack. It's a place where visitors and locals alike both come to sample those fresh clams right out of the fryer. And even the Vice President of the United States has been known to order a quart of clams to go. They come from as far away as Europe. Many are first-time visitors to the Kennebunks. Others have returned again and again. Some come back for the beaches, others for the quaint shops, but for many, a trip to Kennebunkport is for one thing: fried clams. The annual migration for the mollusk. And if you are truly a connoisseur of clams, there's only one place in town: the Clam Shack.
Right into these beautiful clams. Oh, yeah, you've got it.
A Kennebunkport landmark for 18 years, the Clam Shack has even been painted by a local artist. And this year, it was named to have the best clams in all of New England by Yankee Magazine. To the Jakes family, that's reason enough to keep on frying.
Did I tell you my brother's the oldest fryer in the whole state?
He's also probably one of the few teachers who combines teaching with frying clams for a living. As head of the foreign language department at Biddeford High School, Richard Jake spends 9 months behind a desk, then 3 months behind a fryer.
That's the two worlds. I get tired of teaching, and all of a sudden I come here and I'm all excited and I get all juiced up about this. And then when I get tired of this, it's time to go back into education. It's not a job. We do very well. It's put a lot of kids in college.
All on clam money.
All on clam money. That's not on teaching. I couldn't afford it in teaching.
Richard's wife Joanne and brother Ralph are the mainstays of the Clam Shack operation, but their 2 sons also pitch in, as well as some local students. For all of them, it seems to be for fun first and money second.
All right, and how long do they cook? So they're ready. After 18 years, you just know.
Serving up over 200 gallons of fresh Maine clams a week is the key to the Clam Shack's success. Having locals, tourists, and Kennebunkport's biggest celebrity as regular customers doesn't hurt the business either.
Does the vice president ever come in, or do you suspect they're taking clams back to him?
Well, his chefs have been in many times. It was funny. One time my wife was standing at the counter and she said, "Geez, Dick, I think there's a convention of the hearing impaired because all the people out there have hearing aids." I said, "Joanne, that's the Secret Service."
Whatever your occupation, the Clam Shack serves it up right. Bellies and all, this double-shell delicacy is a Kennebunkport tradition.
Very good.
The face
Clams are native to Maine the same way certain people are. People like Joe Foster. He's a Kennebunk high school teacher and as much a landmark here as the Clam Shack. Everyone knows him, and everyone seems to like him. He is so Maine in character that he recently was cast as a prep school teacher in the movie Hot Pursuit.
It's a very easy test. My 16-year-old daughter could handle it.
Fame and fortune aside, Joe Foster has been around the Kennebunks long enough to see them change.
I think it's much better from September to May. You get a real flavor of what Maine should be. Although, as I said, even year-round, it is beginning to change in terms of the crowds and the kind of shops and that sort of thing. The Yankee flavor has changed to somewhat of a merchanty flavor.
Vice President Bush may be one reason for Kennebunkport's rise in popularity. His summer home here is a major tourist attraction. But to the locals, he's just another neighbor.
Joe, what about this story that Vice President Bush wanted to be buried in the churchyard here and they wouldn't let him?
His letter came too late, and he was refused. Now, there has been some comment about maybe there being some adjustments. Whether that happens or not, I don't know. But it'd certainly be rather nice if he was planted here, I suppose.
Whether George Bush has his final resting days here or elsewhere has yet to be resolved. Whatever the outcome, tourists will continue to flock here. But most locals don't seem to mind. To them, the tourists are like the tide. They come in and they go out.
Well, I suppose if you want to meet some famous people, you go to the Clam Shack.
Vice President Bush apparently loves them, Peter. He brings his boat right up behind the Clam Shack, and I guess the Secret Service guys hop out and bring him that quart of clams. Ed Muskie and William Buckley are also regulars there, and with very good reason. Those clams are out of this world.
Okay, coming up next, crafted with care, the Down East boat building tradition continues as we continue along the main streets and back roads of the Kennebunks.
Tourism is now the chief industry along much of the Maine coast. Still, boat building by hand remains a tradition in many spots thanks to people like John Burgess. Burgess runs a boat building school, making sure that an old tradition doesn't become a lost craft.
100 years ago, many of the boats seen sailing off the coast of Maine were built in Kennebunk shipyards. At one time, there were close to 30 shipyards operating along the shores of the Kennebunk River. But then the tourist industry came along, and boat building became secondary. For years, the art of crafting a boat by hand seemed lost. But today, it is a tradition which lives again. Located in this old cow barn is the Landing Boat School. John Burgess is founder and director.
Well, we had a vision that we were going to have a school and that we were going to have 9 students. That's what we had the first year. And we were just so busy writing brochures and getting advertising out and getting tools and literally chasing the cows out of this barn and changing it into a boat shop.
That was 9 years ago. Today, the school is one of 5 boat building schools in the country and the only one to be accredited. Because of this, the Landing Boat School draws students from all over the world, men and women who learn to design, mold, and assemble all kinds of crafts, from dinghies to powerboats.
We all do it really because we love doing it. We're not doing it to get rich, but it's just so rewarding. It's the most fulfilling thing in the world to build a boat and put it in the water and see it float, and people go out to sea in these things, and it's just an incredible experience.
For the past year, these students have worked on a variety of boats. Upon graduation this month, all will have been recruited for jobs. For that and the experience of building a boat by hand, the $5,200 tuition seems worth every penny.
For me right now, this is perfect. I really have a good time doing this. I mean, I go home every day and, come to school and we look at the boat and look at the projects we're working on. It just gives you, it's good satisfaction.
I think this is it. This is it. If I can be as pleased, at the end of the day, as I am here, working professionally, I think it'll be something I'll do for the rest of my life.
I don't know if I'm going to start off, at top wages right away, but I feel like at least I know when I got here that Eamon would say, "No, today we're going to loft the transom," and I go, "What's a transom?" I had no idea.
And what will Joachim Strusloff of Germany remember most about his year here?
The way how people deal with boat building, how they allow you to do your own way and to try your own way, and if the way is wrong, you have to do it again and again and again until you find the right way. They've got a lot of patience here around.
To John Burgess, the Landing Boat School is a dream come true, and by keeping a century-old tradition alive, he is anxious to share his dream.
We really enjoy having people come up and visit. So people are more than welcome to come and see what we're doing. We're very proud of what we're doing and love to show it off.
Age-old traditions are thriving in the Kennebunks. Keeping them alive are folks like John Burgess, Richard Jakes, and Hartley Lord. Each brings with him a unique blend of Maine warmth and Maine humor. Some say this sense of humor is what gets the Mainers through the long, cold winters. That and stories like this one from the inimitable Hartley Lord.
I was up in the West Kennebunk the other day. Says, you know that fellow Purvis Weber hangs around the store. He said he never did a lick of work as far as I know. Well, I came in one morning and I says, "Morning, Purvis. Did you hear what happened uptown last night?" Purvis says, "No, Norman. What was it?" Well, Norman says, Henry Jackson came home, found his wife in bed with another man. He killed them both, and they got him in the jail up in Alfred. Well, Purvis says, "Norman, it could have been worse." Norman says, "Purvis, says, I've known you for over 25 years, and no matter what I tell you, you always come back at me with it could have been worse. Now, what in God's will could have been worse about this? Here they are both dead, and he's in the jail." "Well, Norman," Purvis says, "night before last, he'd have shot me."
Well, that's it for our visit down east. Tomorrow we head south along the main streets and back roads of New England to America's first resort, Newport, Rhode Island. The mansions and the mystique of this high society watering place remain very much intact along Bellevue Avenue. Andrea Hall pays a visit to one of Newport's remaining grand dames, Eileen Slocum. And we'll hear from an 83-year-old former footman at the Breakers estate, who fondly remembers the lavish dinners and elegant tea parties where he served for $65 a month.
Now today's Newport has a bit more spunk, particularly down at Muriel's restaurant. Andrea found out why Muriel has parked mannequins at some of her booths and tables. And she heads out for a sail with the father and son team who own the Newport International Sailing School. Plus, nightlife in Newport. Not just Newport's world-famous jazz and folk festivals, there is great entertainment here year-round. So join us tomorrow night as we head down the main streets and back roads of Newport, Rhode Island. I'm Mary Richardson. Thanks for being with us tonight.
And I'm Peter Mehigan. Good night.
Good night.
I'm Chet Curtis. Join us for News Center 5 tonight. Angry words from local scientists who don't want French divers raiding the Titanic. They're about to begin treasure hunting. And Dixie Whitley finds out what's behind the marching music in Boston. She reports on a John Philip Sousa festival tonight at 11.